Welcome back to the 10-second Runoff powered by Culture Media. We are a little bit short-staffed today. It's just your host, Joe Mitchell, and producer, Magic Mikey Shiaza. Before we get into the full flow of the show today, I do want to let you know we're moving back to 2 shows now that we're in the month of August. We have college football at the end of this month. Week
Football's
0 is
back,
coming
baby.
around. Oh, it's back.
Football's back.
It's all the way back. I know this is a college football show, but we have the Hall of Fame game coming up. We have preseason NFL coming up, and then we're in the full swing. So
No, I'm excited for it.
And we have a full show today. Michigan over there, they're talking about they might set a draft record this year. The Pac12 looks like it's slowly dying. I mean, for all intensive purposes, it's in college football hospice. So that's what we're looking at with the Pac-12. The Big 10, it may be on its way to being the premier conference in college football, competing with the SEC for that. It's kind of always been SEC, Big 10, 1-2. But if they can pull off some of the rumors going on, they may be the premier conference.
It'll be tough for sure.
Yeah, and then you had a couple guys around the country, Jordan Rodgers, Aaron Murray, talking about Joe Milton is the best or the most talented quarterback in the country. We're going to cover that as well. So lots to get into on this episode. Let's start with Michigan. Jim Harbaugh, asked about the talent on his team and the expectations of this season. He said, hey, look, we're going to set a draft record. I think we're going to see 20 guys drafted, and we're going to break Michigan's 15 players drafted record. Georgia's 15 players drafted record. Well, that is insane.
Yeah, that's a lot, especially when you think about it. Those players came from national championship level teams. Like they won back-to-back, right? That happened last year.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
No. They had 10 drafted last year.
Oh, right.
It was 15 the year prior, I believe.
Either way, that's still a national championship team.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like, that's the best team in the country, one of the best teams of all time. So to say you're going to come right off the bat and you're going to beat that, you're going to break that, he said, what, you're going to have 20 guys drafted this year?
He said 20.
There's 55 guys on the team.
Now, look, to be fair, they probably have the most draft-eligible players of any team in the country. They're an extremely talented team. They're up there in terms of blue-chip ratio, tons of 4 and 5 stars, and a lot of them are draft-eligible. They're either redshirt sophomores, juniors, seniors, or graduates. Like, they're a very, very experienced team. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. When I say that's egregious, I don't mean that they can't break the draft record. I think there's actually a pretty good shot that they do. But 20? You're going to break the record by 5?
Yeah, that's a tall order to beat.
Yeah.
But, like you said, like they do have a lot of guys that are draft eligible. And even though we might not see, I'm sure we will see a bunch of guys in the first couple of rounds. But I do think if you're going to go for 20 guys, that's not going to be all top 3 round picks. Like those are going to be day 3 picks later on in the draft, which isn't like there's nothing wrong with that. That's still amazing. But I think that's something that will slip under the radar a little bit.
Now, let me say, I think there's a pretty good shot that Michigan has 20 players on this year's roster that signs an NFL contract next year.
Yes.
But I don't think that means they have 20 players get drafted. Right. I think there's a decent shot that 20 players total could end up on a team, whether it's, undrafted free agency, but I think, or, obviously being drafted. But I think, having 20 players that go on to play in the NFL next year, I don't think that's preposterous. I put a list together of everybody I could think of, whether they're starters or depth guys with NFL talent on Michigan's team, and obviously they have to be draft eligible. So I came up with 18 guys that I could see being drafted, which, by the way, sets the record and breaks it by 3. Yeah. Very, very impressive. Not quite 20.
Oh, off by 2.
Off by 2.
But hey, some people are going to surprise us this year.
I'm going to run through that list. So the list I put together is obviously it started with the quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. I don't think he's going to be a first, second, maybe not even a third-round pick. I think when you're looking at him, he's probably somewhere between rounds 4 to 7, unless he just has a fantastic year and blows everybody out the water. We've seen guys in the past be 5th-round projection and then end up going round 1 because of their draft year. They just broke out.
Joe Burrow is a great example of, not saying anyone's going to be Joe Burrow and go and lead to a perfect season.
Yeah, for sure.
But going into that season, he was a late-round draft pick and then ended up being number 1 overall.
Yeah.
So it's not crazy to say it could happen because it has happened before.
Even Hendon Hooker. He wasn't a huge, he was a 4th or 5th round projection. I want to say he went mid-80s, so 3rd round. He didn't quite make it up to round 1. That's largely because he tore his ACL. I imagine he would have been had he not. And then age had a little to do with it. He was 24, 25, so
He was drafted 68th overall.
68th. Okay, so that's second. No, that's early
like
third round.
Early third round.
That's early third round. So regardless, there are guys that have improved their draft stock in their draft year and done that. And again, had he not torn his ACL, he would have gone higher than the third round.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so I have J.J. McCarthy. I'm going to go through this quickly. Blake Corum, Zach Zinner, Donovan Edwards, Ladarius Henderson, Trevor Keegan, Cornelius Johnson, Junior Colson, Drake Nugent, Roman Wilson, Mike Sanderstill, Chris Jenkins, Carson Barnhart, McCary Page, Michael Barrett, Josiah Stewart, Josh Wallace, Miles Hinton. That's 18 guys.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think those are all draft locks. Those are the 18 guys that I could see being drafted, whether it's earlier or late round picks. But that's impressive.
Oh, for sure.
Now, I did get into a couple arguments with people on Instagram, just in the comments, because we put out a graphic saying that Jim Harbaugh said this, and a lot of it was, of course they can. Michigan's the most talented team in the country. Pause. I think there's a difference. There's a very, very large difference between being the most talented team in the country and having the most draft-eligible players. Very different. I think you look at a team like Alabama, they are, in my opinion, and in 24/7's opinion, let's just be frank, they are the most talented team in the entire country. They just don't have quite as many draft-eligible players as Michigan does.
Right.
And the same can be said about teams like Georgia, Texas A&M. There's teams all around the country. Oregon's extremely talented this year. Washington has the top-end talent, but maybe not the full depth that teams like Michigan or Ohio State, those teams may have. I just think in terms of the draft, Michigan's got the most draft-eligible players. That's not to say they're not talented, but I do think there's a difference between the two. So I got into an argument and made a lot of people mad about that. I would love to see this. I think it's great whenever, just keep setting that standard higher.
Yeah, records are meant to be broken.
Records are meant to be broken, and it happens all the time. Like you mentioned LSU and Joe Burrow. In 2019, they set the record at 15. It's now, they set the record at 13 or 14?
I believe so.
Was it 14? Because Georgia then broke it not long after. And now Michigan's got a good shot to do it this year.
So, yeah, LSU had 14.
LSU?
And that tied the record with 14. Ohio State had 14 as well one year.
Yeah, so there you go. LSU and Ohio State both had 14. I keep saying Michigan. Georgia broke the record at 15, and now Michigan's looking to break that record.
You keep saying Michigan. Maybe they're going to do it because you keep saying it.
They might. Well, look, while we're on Michigan, I know Harbaugh said that they were going to have 20 players drafted. He won't get to coach them the first 4 games of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he got suspended for some pretty silly things, but, I mean, do you think that's going to affect them the first 4 games of the year?
No. I mean, the first 4 games of the year are cakewalks. It's 3 out of conference and then Rutgers.
Yeah. So
the conference game they play week 4 is Rutgers. Yeah, it may as well be out of conference. That suspension won't matter. It's just a formality. Let's get into this whole deal, right? So news broke, was it later last week, that Jim Harbaugh would be suspended 4 games on recruiting violations. Well, then you really kind of get into what's going on. The recruiting violation was buying cheeseburgers for recruits. Yeah. They went to a restaurant. He bought cheeseburgers for recruits. Not the end of the world. I don't think anybody really cares about that. It's not like he was buying them Lambos and this, that, and the other. And also, we live in the world of NIL. Of course, the coach and the school itself cannot, give money or buy gifts for players. But
they're the ones pulling the strings.
Well, no, I'm not even saying that. But collectives can, True. And business organizations can. And look, I'm not saying that it's fine that Harbaugh did that. I'm also not saying it's the end of the world, but that to me isn't the biggest problem here. He's not suspended for buying those players cheeseburgers. He's suspended for lying to the investigators at the NCAA about it.
Yeah.
Whenever they started investigating, and then he started denying and saying, well, I don't know, I can't remember, I do this all the time, blah, blah, blah. I see recruits every day. That's all fine and good, but lying to NCAA investigators about a recruiting, issue is a level 1 violation.
Yeah.
So then we talk about the consequences. And again, I don't think this is a huge deal. I don't particularly care that he bought the players cheeseburgers, but it is a violation to lie to the NCAA, and you have to put your foot down somewhere. If you're lying about cheeseburgers, there's a good shot you're doing other shady stuff. So I think you have to put your foot down somewhere if you're the NCAA and say, you can't lie to us. right? I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's definitely what they were going for with the suspension. Like, if he just came out and said, "Oh yeah, like I bought them cheeseburgers, whatever," it probably would have been a fine, maybe a 1-game suspension, maybe something like that. But 4 games is more so just like, hey, you want to lie to us? All right, you're gonna pay for that a little bit.
Yeah. Now, is he gonna pay for that a little bit? Because I know it's just a 4-game suspension. This is the perfect 4 games in his entire coaching career at Michigan that he's okay being suspended for. I mean, it's the easiest 4-game stretch that he's probably ever had. And here's the deal. They negotiated it with him. They came to an agreement on what the punishment would be. Hey, if you're in trouble, you don't get a say in what the punishment is, what the consequences are. I mean, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little ridiculous to think that they were like, hey, what do you think is fair for this?
Yeah.
And he probably looked at the schedule, and he was probably like, oh, you know what?
Just sit me out those
give me
first
4
4
games.
Yeah.
I lied to you guys. That's on me. 4 games, first 4 games of the year. Like, oh, great. So I think it works out good for both sides.
I mean, I don't know about good, but
I don't know if good's the right word now that I think about it, but it works out.
It's something.
Both sides
for
get
sure.
something. Yeah.
All right, so, we covered that. They're going to have however many players drafted. Harbaugh suspended for not buying cheeseburgers, but for lying to the NCAA. Let's talk about the Pac-12 for a second. Are they going to exist in the near future?
I mean, I think with the way that college football is going, with the expanded playoffs and with all these conference realignments happening, it's going to end up being like a power 2, and then the rest are just going to be just there.
Hold that. We need to get to that in a second.
Right.
We will. I said it in the intro to the show. It almost feels like the Pac-12 is just in college football hospice. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not quite gone yet, but the Pac-12 as we know it is surely dying.
For sure.
Surely dying. They're 100% losing USC and UCLA next year in 2024. They're 100% losing Colorado next year. Pause. Let's talk about that. USC they've been in the Pac-12 championship in back-to-back years. Now, I know Utah won it. Utah's staying, all fine and good. USC, one of the, in my opinion, blue bloods of college football in the Pac-12 champion back-to-back, in the Pac-12 championship back-to-back years, and one of the biggest brands and recognized name in the entire country. UCLA, same can be said about them. Maybe haven't been quite the powerhouse that USC has, but Paul, let me check that. I'm sorry. USC was in the Pac-12 championship last year. The year prior, they were not. They were a bad team. They simply were not good. So not in the Pac-12 championship in the first year, but they were last year, and are very much on the come up with Lincoln Riley, and they have the Heisman winner coming back, all that. Just wanted to clarify that. Didn't want to sound like an idiot. They were not good the year prior, not back-to-back championship appearances. Okay, UCLA, again, one of the biggest brands. It's an LA school, one of the better schools in the country outside of just football. But they've had guys like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I know he's gone now. They've had Zach Charbonnet gone now. I get it. I still think they're going to be a good offense. Chip Kelly, great head coach. He's not going to let that program just dwindle. They're going to be fine, in my opinion. They're going to be a 7-8 win team for the foreseeable future, and potentially more than that. Well, you got something? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, plus moving to a different conference, moving out of the Pac-12, they'd be moving to the Big 10, correct?
Yeah.
Moving to the Big 10, like, obviously that's going to attract different recruits, more recruits, so I think that will help them a lot in the long run. So, like, if you have, like, a West Coast guy, and then he wants to go to a Big 10 team, then that could help him out.
Yeah, for sure. But you run in this. I don't want to get too deep into UCLA, but you run into the same thing. You just go to Los Angeles, and there's 2 schools, and one of them is better right now. Yeah. But regardless, they just pulled 5-star quarterback Dante Moore out of the last year's recruiting cycle. Chip Kelly, again, great coach, great quarterback mind, great offensive mind. Like I said, he's not going to let this team just turn into. They're not going to be bad. They'll have 7 wins minimum, in my opinion, for the foreseeable future. Now, that's 2 of the higher-end brands in the Pac-12 that are leaving, which is problematic. What is potentially even more problematic is Colorado had 1 win last year, and they're leaving.
Yeah, that's insane. That's really crazy to think about that. A 1-win team is – I mean, I know with all the media attention and with Deion Sanders hopefully turning that team around, that's what – they're hoping for with all of this. But to think that you went 1-11 last year and now you're leaving the conference to go to subjectively, objectively, a better conference.
Objectively.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Big 12, I would say the Big 12 is a more competitive conference than the Pac-12.
More competitive is
the
better.
Pac-12
That's a
has
better word
better teams in
Yeah.
it. And again, whenever Colorado gets to the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma won't be there anymore. But they'll still have the TCU. They'll still have Oklahoma State. They'll have Baylor. They'll have plenty of teams there. So I think that'll be a more competitive, especially considering USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12. Yeah, I'm going to say the Big 12 is a better conference. The thing with Colorado, what I think is so weird, we talked about USC and UCLA being two big brands leaving the conference. Of course, that's problematic. Colorado leaving, one-win team. That's scary if you're the Pac-12, because that is the bottom of your conference. I mean, Colorado and Stanford were, and Cal, but Colorado and Stanford were the bottom of the Pac-12 last year, and one of those teams is out. And the reason stated as to why is because there's too much uncertainty in the conference. Of course there is.
Yeah.
Of course there is. They can't get ESPN to sign a media deal, and let's be honest, Deion Sanders is going out and trying to get the best recruits in the country. I'm not saying that he'll be successful in doing so, but that's absolutely what he's trying to do. That's what everybody's trying to do. I think he's just going to have a better chance to do that than a lot of the other teams, on Colorado's caliber. The problem with that, and again, he brought in the most transfers of any team ever this offseason. More transfers than we've ever seen. He just brought into Colorado. So he's proven that he can go out and get guys.
Right.
The problem with that, when you're going to recruit at a high level to build a program literally from the ground up, this isn't people talk about Ryan Day being born on third base, and I may feel differently, and we don't have to agree on that statement. I don't hold that opinion, by the way, but people will talk about that with Ryan Day. There's none of that with Deion. He inherited a one-win team and didn't keep any of his roster.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you're going to recruit at a high level, you can't be coaching at a team that the Saturday night game could be following Chris Leno's best. It's not going to happen. Nobody wants their game to. Here's the thing: Saturday night, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, watching a Pac-12 game, or I guess it would be closer to 10:30 or 11 as you get into the second half. But you're watching the second half of a Pac-12 game. Imagine you have Oregon and Washington going head-to-head, back and forth, scoring and scoring. Your game's in the 40s. There's 6 minutes left, and because of your TV slot and you don't have an ESPN deal, the game gets cut off by wipeout. I mean, what recruits want to go play there?
Yeah.
It's not good. If you're the commissioner of the Pac-12, man, you have to start pulling strings. You got to do everything you could possibly do to get a media deal done yesterday. Because when you're losing USC and UCLA and Colorado's reason stated is there's too much uncertainty, that is a very, very valid point.
For sure.
So, yes, I think they're in college football hospice. I think they're on their way out. Maybe not dissolving as a conference, but I think the Pac-12 as we know it will be gone in the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Without a doubt.
Moving on top of that, there's rumors that Oregon and Washington could be making a departure soon as well. Potentially that news, and again, it's just rumors. I'm not saying there's any facts. There's nothing proven to say that this is true, but the rumor is that news could break as early as the end of this week that Oregon and Washington could be headed to the Big 10 alongside Clemson and Florida State from the ACC. That would be obnoxious.
That's dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous. Oregon and Washington are going to be 2 top 25 teams this year. Same can be said about Clemson, Florida State. I mean, in that 4-team group, it's going to be hard to just pick 4 teams in the country and say they're all going to be top 10, but all 4 of those teams have top 10 potential. You pull 2 teams with top 10 potential from the Pac-12 and from the ACC and put them in the Big 10, already the second best conference in the country. Not only do you just decimate the 2 conferences they're leaving, but what you do for the Big 10 is you just further ingrain them in that elite status, and I think they become the premier conference in the country.
Yeah, I mean, competing with the SEC is definitely hard. Like, it just means more in the SEC. The SEC has always been, or not always been, but in recent memory, they've been the conference. They've been college football. You think of college football, you think of an SEC team, you think of them winning all the national championships and stuff. But, I mean, that's definitely going to add some competition to it for sure. And I love to see it.
So here's the thing, right? The conversation about SEC versus Big Ten. If you look at the SEC, there's teams that are bowl eligible every year, top to bottom, minus Vandy and sometimes Mizzou. But you're looking at Alabama, elite every year. Georgia, elite. They don't miss bowl games, and they have back-to-back championships. You go LSU, haven't missed a bowl game in quite some time. They sat out a bowl game. A couple years ago, it was self-imposed, some sort of violation, whatever. But they had 6 wins that year. It was actually the COVID year. They had 5 wins. They were 50%. So they were 5-5, but they could have gone to a bowl game because they were eligible. They don't miss bowl games. Auburn, they don't miss bowl games. They just hired Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze is a great football coach. He's flipping 5 stars from Alabama and Georgia right now.
Yeah.
Like, that news was going on all week. So Auburn they didn't miss a bowl game last year, and they're back on their way up, right? Check me on that. Did they miss a bowl game last year? I don't believe they did.
Let me check.
Texas A&M, on the other hand, did. Texas A&M missed a bowl game, but here's the deal. They have one of the most talented teams in the country, and they went and hired Bobby Petrino.
Yeah. So Auburn went 5-7 last year.
So Auburn did miss a bowl game.
Yeah.
Auburn did miss a bowl game last year. But again, they just hired Hugh Freeze, so that they're transforming their program. And historically, you're talking about teams that don't. Arkansas, where they were 6-7 last year, 6-6, 6-7, 7-5 maybe. Arkansas.
Yeah, Arkansas was 7-6. So the 3 teams that had 5 wins or less in the SEC last year: Auburn 5-7, A&M 5-7, and Vandy 5-7.
Yeah, so
it's not like the SEC had a team that was 1-11 like Colorado was last year, or even
for sure.
Even their bottom tier teams all had 5 wins.
So Vandy is one that you can absolutely say misses bowl games pretty regularly.
Yeah,
I'm not arguing that, but I'm going to venture to say that Texas A&M and Auburn were more anomalies than anything. They're not going to continue to miss bowl games regularly. That's 2 of the bigger names in the country, 2 well-respected programs nationally. So if we were going to talk about the SEC and you're throwing A&M and Auburn into teams that are missing bowl games, is that the argument we're going to have? That's the conversation that's how you want to take this? I think that's a bad route if that's the route you want to take, because we can just say, okay, Auburn won a national championship in 2014. Name me a team from your conference, not named the Big 10, that won one since then. If you're the Pac12, you can say, I can't. If you're the ACC, you can say Clemson did, but only Clemson.
And they're leaving.
Potentially, maybe. But that's my point. Is if the teams missing bowl games in the SEC are also teams that had national championships in the last 10 years, I think that's more of a testament to the difficulty of the SEC.
For sure.
Than anything. And then again, you move down the list: Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky. These are all teams that are not. I'm not going to say they're all elite teams, but they're all 7, 8, 9 win teams every single year, and it raises the level of competition. Now you go to the Big Ten. You already have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Those are top 10 potential teams. You look at a team like Illinois, one of the best defenses in the country. You look at Iowa, one of the best defenses in the country. You add Clemson, again. When you look at Clemson, I don't. They've had several years in a row winning 10 games or more. I want to say it's been since 2010 that they have won less than 10 games.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let me pull that up and see Clemson's records throughout the year.
Yeah, Florida State's got a Heisman dark horse, so if they go to the Big Ten, that adds that. USC, obviously UCLA, they're going to the Big Ten. But if you bring Oregon and Washington, Oregon's got a playoff appearance. I don't believe Washington has a playoff appearance. Do they?
I don't
Check that for me real quick. Does Washington have a playoff appearance? I know Michigan State does. I think they might, bro.
Oh, they do. In 2016, they made the college football playoff.
Yeah, so Washington has a playoff appearance. So you're adding teams that Washington, Oregon, Clemson all have playoff appearances. Oregon played for a national championship. I believe Oregon played for a national championship. And then, hell, bro, Florida State has a playoff appearance. All 4 of those teams have playoff appearances.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they all go to the Big Ten, that's wild. That would be wild.
That's elite.
Yeah, I think at that point the Big Ten becomes the premier conference in the country. And I did some research on this. I looked back. We already know USC, UCLA is going to the Big Ten. We know Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC. So if those 4 teams, Clemson, Florida State, Oregon, Washington, were to go to the Big Ten, that would mean that every national champion since 2001 would now belong to one of those 2 conferences. In 2001, Miami won it. They would still remain in the ACC for the time being. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
But the SEC would hold 15 national champions in that time frame. The Big Ten would hold 6. That means there is people alive who can legally go to a bar and buy beer that have never seen anybody that is currently not in one of those 2 conferences win a national championship.
Yeah, that's
what?
crazy. That's insane to think about. Like the way that college football is going now, like that's just wild to think about how those 2 conferences will literally just run everything if all these rumors are true and these teams do end up leaving and going away.
Yeah. Now I wanted to double check myself, and so I looked at it. I said, okay, so it's been since 2001 that, again, assuming all this happens, those teams would now belong to those 2 conferences. So I looked past 2001. I was like, okay, well, how many did they win before that? You have to go back another 10 years to find a national champion that wouldn't then belong to those 2 conferences, and it's Miami again in 1991. So if Miami were to go to the SEC or the Big Ten, which I don't think they would. I'm not hearing rumors about that. They potentially could in the future. Who knows?
Maybe no rumors as of right now, but with everything going on.
I'm certainly not
ruling it out.
Yeah, ruling it out. But if they were to join one of those conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten would be represented in the last 3 decades of national championship winners.
I'm just speechless just thinking about that. That's just insane.
Yeah, and that's not to say that they would retroactively hold those national championships. It still belong to the conferences. But the point is, the teams that did it would all now belong to those 2 conferences. And moving forward, what do you think that means? I mean,
those 2 teams are those 2 conferences are gonna run college football, and everyone else is not saying that they're gonna be irrelevant, because they're not. There's always gonna be teams from every conference that surprise us or do amazing things.
No doubt about it. And here's the thing. If that were to happen, just staying along this, hypothetical, if that were to happen, they would have to restructure the 12-team playoff that we haven't even gotten into yet, because that starts next year in 2024. But if you think that after one contract, I don't know how long that contract is. Can you look up how long the 12-team playoff setup is? But in that format, you're going to tell me athletic directors conference commissioners from the SEC and the Big Ten are going to sign anything saying there's going to be 6 auto bids when there's only 2 conferences that have team. There's only 2 conferences holding teams from the last 30 national championships.
Yeah,
no, they're not signing that. They're saying no. It's got to be the 12 best teams if we're going to do 12, because you start bidding 4 teams that win their assume not including the SEC and Big Ten, 6 auto bids. Those are all conference champions, but one of those is G5, and the Power 5 isn't going to exist in 3 years.
Yeah, it's going to be the Power 2 or 3, and the Power 5 is not going to, like you said, it's not going to exist anymore.
Yeah, and so you're going to essentially have the Pac12, assuming Oregon and Washington leave, the best teams remaining are going to be Utah and Oregon State. 2 good teams, no doubt about it. I'm not saying those are bad teams. But then it just becomes, okay, Utah and Oregon State's matchup, who wins that every year? They're an auto bid.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to see
bad for college
that.
Football.
You look at the ACC, if Clemson and Florida State leave, now their best teams are, and this one's a little more competitive because you can say they have Pitt, Wake Forest, Louisville, North Carolina, Miami. So that one's a little bit more competitive, but you're going to see one of those 5 in the playoff every year. You look at the Big 12. I know they're losing Texas and Oklahoma, but again, they're retaining some guys. And I think that the additions to the Big 12 aren't really getting enough respect. I really think UCF is going to be. I think they're going to settle into that conference. It may take them a year or two, but they're going to be a good team in the Big 12. And I think the same can be said about Houston, to be honest. So the problem is, if you just transfer the Power 5 down to a Power 4 or a Power 2 and a semi-Power 2, whatever it looks like, if you just transfer that down, you're going to fans in the Pac-12, fans in the current group of 5 format are just going to be pissed. I think the best route is take auto bids out, the top 12 teams get in my opinion. My opinion doesn't necessarily matter, though.
But that might be the only way to do it. Like, that seems like not saying the only fair way to do it, because there's no fair way. Someone's always going to be upset. Someone's always going to be hurt. But, I mean, with the way it's going, like you're saying, with the auto bids and stuff, like, that's not what anyone wants. You don't want one team that's just by default in there, and then you're a fan of an SEC school, and you don't get in, but your team, if you look at them on paper, it's clearly better than this auto bid that's getting in. Like, that's just... It's not. I don't think it's good for college football. I don't think it's good for fans. I don't think it's good for schools. And then, like, these recruits who are coming to play at high levels, and then they get to see these other teams just get in on default. Like, that just doesn't seem. It just doesn't seem right.
I'm with you, bro. Could you imagine watching a Big 10 football game, flipping the channels? You know, let's say the 10 o'clock spot, the 2 o'clock spot, and then they got a night game. So you're watching 3 Big 10 football games in a day. And one of them takes place in Ann Arbor, one of them takes place in Tallahassee, and one of them takes place in Los Angeles. And that's the Big 10?
Yeah, I mean,
that's crazy to think about.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
It's all over the country now.
All right, we've been on that for a little while, but I think it's just really interesting what's going on in those conferences. I think whenever you saturate those two conferences to the point that they're being saturated, it makes it really hard for the best teams in that conference to have enough wins to be ranked high enough to get in. So that gets interesting. But also, it so decimates the strength of schedule of teams from other conferences that it makes it hard for them to get in. So how do you determine, is a 3-loss Big 10 champion at that point, when you're talking about a 18 to 20 team league, is a 3-loss Big 10 champion more deserving than a 1-loss ACC champion? Like, that's
where it gets tough.
It gets real tricky that way. Again, I'm not answering that. I'm just posing the question.
I mean, we've seen with the 4-team playoff how there's always controversy every year. Like last year, there was controversy. Should Alabama be in over TCU, or years past? Like, I remember someone's always mad with the first 2 out with 5 and 6. If you're a fan of one of those 2 teams, there's almost always an argument on why they should be in over a team that made it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that all those arguments are always fair or correct, but people are always upset no matter what. Yeah. And I feel like there's just going to be way more controversy going forward with the way that things are going.
Yeah. All right, we've been on this for a while now. How long have we been going?
35.
35? Okay, cool. We've been on this a while now. Let's move on. So, like I mentioned in the intro, Aaron Murray said it a while back. He said that Joe Milton is the most talented quarterback in the country, and it's not close. Jordan Rodgers just repeated that. He doubled down on that. What are your thoughts?
Are we forgetting that Caleb Williams exists?
Caleb Williams exists. That's key. He won the Heisman last year. He's coming back.
I mean, it's just kind of tough to put that high level of praise on a player who wasn't even a starter last year.
Not only wasn't a starter last year, he's a 5th-year guy, and he has 2 starts total.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not saying he's going to be a bad quarterback. I fully expect him to be a really good quarterback and find himself in the Heisman conversation midway through the year. I really do believe that. I think he's going to be a great quarterback for Tennessee, and I'm not trying to not taking away from the guy or throwing shade at him at all. I really think he's going to be a great quarterback. If you're a Tennessee fan, you got a great guy behind center. I really believe that. But I think just the loose lips talking about this guy is the most talented quarterback in the country. Hey, if that's true, why hadn't he been on the field the last 4 years?
Yeah.
And not to mention, can you? Let me not do that. He was at Michigan before. Okay, he was at Michigan before. Transferred out of Michigan, went to Tennessee, and he didn't find the field at either place. And he may have been behind certain guys like Hendon Hooker, great talent, older guy, more experienced guy. Again, was in the Heisman conversation. Had he not torn his ACL, there's a great shot that he potentially could win that. I think if he doesn't tear his ACL, it's between him and Caleb Williams, and it's not close.
Right.
He may not have won it, but regardless, that's water under the bridge. But to tell me that a quarterback that's stepping in, that has 2 starts in his entire college football career, and he's in his 5th year, is the most talented, I'm going to call BS.
Yeah, I don't believe it. Like you said, I think he's going to be a good quarterback this year. I think he's going to do big things, but to come right off the bat, right before the season starts, where we haven't really seen anything from him, and to just automatically be like, yeah, he's the most talented guy in the country. Like you said, it's been 5 years he's been in college football, 2 starts.
He may be the most physically gifted. I think there's an argument for that.
I mean, if what he's saying is true and he can sling the ball over 90 yards, then
I think he has the strongest arm. Like I'm not gonna. I'm certainly gonna say that. I think there's a great shot he has the strong. No, he has the strongest arm of any quarterback in the country. I'll say that definitively. He may be the most physically gifted. He's a big guy. He's fast. He's gonna be able to run it. He'll drop his shoulder on a linebacker. Like, I'm not saying he's running over a bunch of linebackers, but he's not afraid of the contact, and he has that kind of arm. He may be the most physically gifted, but if we're talking about just talent and his ability to play the quarterback position, we have no clue. He hadn't taken the field.
Yeah. And then that's what we do know about Caleb Williams is he's been starting now, and we've seen him time and time again make these amazing plays, make these plays where no one thought it was going to happen, and that's talent. Like that's saying that the most talented guys will go out when the lights shine the brightest, and they go out and make these big plays week in and week out.
Not to mention, we put out a post earlier in the week, and an AFC scout talking about Caleb Williams is comparing him to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to make that leap. I don't think. Look, Patrick Mahomes is on his way to. He needs to have a long career. He needs to be playing for the same amount of time Brady did. But if he plays that long, if he plays the same amount of time Brady did, he's well on his way to being the greatest quarterback of all time.
I truly think that he's going to be the greatest quarterback.
This isn't an NFL show. That may be controversial. I don't know. That's my opinion. But the point is, I don't think we need to be comparing anybody who's never played an NFL snap to Patrick Mahomes. But what he went on to say is Caleb Williams is the best NFL prospect. Let's say Caleb Williams is a better NFL prospect than guys like Bryce Young, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. Does that mean he's going to be better than them in the NFL? I don't know. But in terms of prospects, I think Joe Burrow is probably better than Trevor Lawrence in the NFL. But Trevor Lawrence was a higher rated prospect. So that's just an example of what I mean. But they're saying Caleb Williams is a higher rated prospect than all of those guys?
And I don't think that's crazy to say.
I don't either. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. If I'm an NFL GM and I have the first pick in the draft, I'm taking Caleb Williams. No doubt about that. But that's bold. It's bold.
It's a fair conversation.
It's a fair conversation. That's a great place.
If someone said Joe Milton is in that conversation, then what do you say to that?
No, I'm laughing.
Exactly.
And again, it's not a shot at Joe Milton.
He's just not proven.
He's not proven.
And if he comes out this year and plays lights out, wins the Heisman, leads Tennessee to I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but if they have a playoff berth, then yeah, you can look back on that take and be like, all right, yeah, you kind of knew what you were talking about. We were wrong.
No. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So here's no, and I'm serious. And again, I really don't take it as if I'm throwing shade. I'm not. I think Joe Milton's going to be a good quarterback, and I think Tennessee's going to be a very good team. But if you make that claim and happen to be right, that doesn't change the fact that it was a baseless claim.
That's true.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So that's where I stand on it. I think those guys are great. Aaron Murray and Jordan Rodgers, love them. I watch them and follow them a lot. I just think that is a horrible, horrible take. You got anything else?
No, I'm good. I mean, I think you're definitely right in saying that. I don't think that. I think Joe Milton will be good this year, but to say right off a jump street that he's the most talented quarterback, I think that's pretty far-fetched.
Yeah, and I do think he'll be in the Heisman conversation at some point in the year.
For sure.
And he may end in the Heisman conversation if they can find a way to be 11-1 or even 10-2. Look, there have been Heisman winners for 10-2 teams. So if he has an amazing year and they lose to Georgia and South Carolina, I don't think they will, but I'm just using it as an example. Let's say they go 10-2 with losses to Georgia and South Carolina, but he threw for 4,700 yards and ran for 800. He's the Heisman.
Yeah.
You see what I'm like? He's the Heisman in that case. So I don't think that's a crazy thought to have. I think when you look at his game, is he going to be able to throw for 4,000 or more? Once you get into that, I think I'm expecting 4,000. But once you get into 4,500, that territory, you need a good offensive line. I think that's a big question mark for them. It's one thing to be able to throw it 90 yards. It's another thing to have 6 seconds to let your wide receiver get 90 yards down the field. Yeah. Or get 60 yards down the field so you can lob it and let them run another 30. Mm-hmm. Like, you need time to do that. You're never going to see that in a football game.
Right.
So, that's where I'm at.
That's valid.
That's where I'm at. Hey, look, I told you we're going to put out 2 shows a week. So our second show of the week, we'll get back to our schedule predictions. We're going to break down Washington, Oregon, and Utah. So we're going to stay in that dying Pac-12 for this week for our second show. But if you're fans of those teams, make sure you lock in, subscribe. You don't want to miss that episode. Thank y'all.